Nobody reads these. My brother laughed as he signed Addendum B without even looking. He thought he was helping me sell a useless warehouse for $480K, not realizing he'd just signed over $2. Won him in hidden rights. I waited until the closing to hand the title officer the pages he skipped, the look on his face. My name is Michael Hargrove. I'm 39 years old. I've spent the last 14 years as a licensed property title examiner, the person who reads every document before a sale closes, looking for the detail nobody else caught. It's not glamorous, but it's steady, it pays well, and in 14 years, I've never been wrong about a property that passed through my hands. My father Gerald called that stability. He didn't mean it as a compliment. Jason is 3 years older than me and has done 2 property flips in the last decade. One worked, one didn't. He calls himself an entrepreneur. My father would ask him about his next project before the appetizers arrived. He'd ask me if I was still doing the paperwork thing. I was. I still am. Jason had vision. I had a desk job. The family had already decided which one mattered. The night before the will reading, the family gathered at Nolan's Grill. Private room, long table, a bottle of wine Jason ordered before anyone sat down. The attorney had suggested the dinner keep things warm, he said. My father had been gone 3 weeks. Warm was a stretch. We were 20 minutes in when Jason said it. Not quietly, not like he was testing the idea, just casually, the way you'd confirm a flight time. The beach house will obviously go to Lauren and me. We're the ones who'd actually use it. Lauren squeezed his hand. Nobody at the table said a word. I looked at my father's empty chair. I didn't correct him. I didn't have to. The will hadn't been read yet, but Jason had already decided, and the room had already agreed. That night, I went home and pulled the public records on both properties. 14 years of examining titles will do that to you. You don't turn it off. The beach house was clean. The warehouse file was 44 pages. I read all of them. On page 31, buried in a municipal tax notice under item 7B, in a font slightly smaller than everything around it. Industrial Multi-Use Subsurface Easement Active. Federal Contractor Classification. And clipped to page 33, in my father's handwriting. Ask Callaway about the fiber line 1998. He knew. He had always known. I don't know why he never acted on it. Maybe he was waiting to hand it to someone who would actually read the attachments. Jason raised his glass at dinner and said, "To Dad and to the future." I didn't drink. Attorney Callaway read the will the following Tuesday morning. His office smelled like old carpet and printer toner. Jason and Lauren sat across from me in matching chairs, close enough that their shoulders touched. Lauren had a notepad. I still don't know what she expected to write down. Callaway read through the standard language, first accounts, personal effects, a small charitable bequest to a church my father had attended twice. Then he got to the properties: Pelican Shore, the beach house on the water, 4 bedrooms, private dock, appraised at $1.4 million. Transferred in full to Jason Hargrove. Jason nodded once. The nod of a man confirming his own math. Lauren said, "Of course," under her breath. She didn't bother to whisper it. Then Callaway read the second property. The Denton Street Warehouse, parcel 0-4-0882, C. Single-story masonry, approximately 8,400 square feet, county assessed at $310,000. Transferred in full to Michael Hargrove. Along with, and I remember the exact phrasing because I was already listening for it, all attachments, easements, and subsurface rights as filed. Jason's eyes were on his phone before Callaway finished the sentence. I read that line twice. Callaway moved on to the signature pages. Routine estate paperwork, transfer addendums, a notarized document he called Addendum B, fixtures, and structural rights confirmation, standard language to close out the estate. Jason signed where the tabs indicated. He was on a call with Lauren by the time he reached page 4. She was already outside, talking about paint colors for Pelican Shore. He signed Addendum B with his left hand while nodding at something she said through his earpiece. He didn't read what he was signing. I watched him do it. I didn't say a word. After, in the parking lot, Jason clapped me on the shoulder the way people do when they feel guilty but not guilty enough to change anything. "Don't worry, man. We can help you sell it fast. I know a few developers probably get you close to assessed, maybe a little over." He said it like a favor, like he was handing me something. I thanked him. I got in my car. I drove home and opened the warehouse file again. The phrase, "all attachments," was still there on page 1 of the transfer document, in plain black type. Bold. 3 days after the will reading, I was at my kitchen table at 10 in the evening with the warehouse transfer file open in front of me. 44 pages. I'd already read it once. I read it again. Most people treat probate documents like terms and conditions you skim, you sign, you move on. I don't do that. 14 years of title work will do something to you. You stop trusting the summary. You read the whole thing, including the parts that look like filler. My father called it my version of stability. Jason called it a waste of time. Jason, for the record, had not asked a single question about the warehouse. Not at the will reading, not in the parking lot, not once in the 3 days since. He was already texting contractors about Pelican Shore. I knew because he'd sent me a photo of a tile sample without context, then realized he'd sent it to the wrong brother. I kept reading. Page 31 didn't look like filler. It was a municipal tax notice, the kind that gets folded into a probate packet and ignored by everyone except county clerks and people like me. Line item 7B, 2 points smaller than the rest. Industrial multi-use subsurface easement active. Federal contractor classification. I read it 3 times. Page 33, a county deed annotation referencing a right-of-way under what looked like a federal infrastructure corridor designation. I cross-referenced it in the county's public record system. Took me 40 minutes. When the full record loaded, I sat back and didn't move for a while. Then I found the note. Clipped to page 33, folded once, in my father's handwriting, asked Callaway about the fiber line 1998. My father had known since 1998. He'd flagged it himself. He just never followed through. I called the county assessor's office the next morning. The clerk confirmed it without hesitation. Parcel 0 to 4, 0882, C. Active subsurface easement, federal infrastructure classification. The easement corridor ran 2,200 linear feet directly beneath the warehouse footprint. The tenant, a defense-adjacent secure fiber communications company, had been paying annual lease consideration into an escrow account since the original 1998 filing. I asked when the last payment was logged. She said 2013. I asked if the account was still open. She said yes. The escrow administrator had been waiting for a qualified claimant to come forward. Then she said the thing that made me set the phone down on the table for a moment before I picked it back up. Nobody's ever called about this one before. The annual lease rate under the 1998 filing was $191,000. The easement had auto-renewed every 5 years: 2003, 2008, 2013, 2018, 2023. It was active right now. 11 years of payments, sitting untouched since 2013. I did the math on a notepad, wrote the number down. Then I sat with it for a long time. The escrow had been open for 11 years. Nobody had ever called. I hadn't told anyone what I'd found. Not yet. I needed to be certain before I said a word, certain about what the easement meant, certain about who had standing, certain about what the number on that notepad actually represented. That's how I work. You don't walk into a room until you know what's in it. Jason didn't have that problem. 9 days after the will reading, I got a text at 9:41 in the morning. Crestline came in at $480K. That's a clean 55% over assessed. You should take it, Mike. I already told them you'd want to move fast. I read it twice. Then a third time. He had already told them. Crestline Partners was a mid-sized developer Jason knew from one of his flips. They built mixed-use residential. Their model was straightforward: buy old, industrial, demolish, rebuild. Jason had pitched them on my warehouse without asking me. Told them I was motivated to sell, and sent me the offer afterward, like a receipt for something he'd already purchased on my behalf. $480,000. For a parcel sitting on top of $2 million in uncollected escrow payments and an active federal easement that any demolition crew would surface inside the first 2 weeks of breaking ground. I drafted a response 3 times. The third one said, "There are attachments in the warehouse transfer you need to read." I deleted it. If I said that now, Jason would stall, involve attorneys, and muddy a title that was currently clean and entirely mine. I put the phone down and went back to the probate file, Addendum B. I'd skimmed it at Callaway's office. It was described as routine, fixtures and structural rights, confirmation, standard estate language. I read it fully now, slowly. Page 4. Paragraph 3. All subsurface easements, and rights of way as recorded in parcel 040882C transfer in full to the receiving party. Jason's signature was at the bottom of that page. Large, slightly rushed. No initials on the clause, just the page signature, which under notarized estate procedure was sufficient to bind everything on it. I called Calloway. Read him the paragraph. There was a pause, not long, but the kind a careful man takes before he commits to something. That's correct, he said. The subsurface rights transferred with the parcel. They're yours, Michael. I thanked him and called Jason back. Told him I wasn't ready to make a decision on Crestline. He laughed, not unkindly, just the way he laughed at things he found slightly absurd. Mike, it's a warehouse. What exactly are you waiting for? I'm still reading the paperwork, I said. A pause. Then, you're overthinking a standard form, man. It's a probate packet. Nobody reads those. I told him I'd be in touch. What I didn't tell him was that Crestline's due diligence process required a full title review and that Jason himself would need to be present at the closing as a courtesy, since he'd brokered the introduction. He'd arranged the meeting himself. He just didn't know what I'd be bringing to it. He'd signed the page. He just hadn't read it. The next call I made was to Calloway's office, not about Addendum B this time, about the 1998 filing my father had noted. I asked him to pull Gerald's archived legal papers. He called me back 2 days later. The original easement filing was 26 pages, prepared in August of 1998 by my father's attorney at the time, a man named Voss, whose firm had since retired but whose records were still held in storage. Calloway had the document scanned and emailed to me by end of day. I opened it at my kitchen table that evening. The language was dense but precise. Federal Infrastructure Easement Right-of-Way, Parcel 040882C, filed the 19th of August 1998. The easement corridor, 2,200 linear feet beneath the warehouse footprint. The tenant, a defense, adjacent secure fiber communications company. Annual lease consideration, $191,000. To be held in escrow pending collection by the parcel owner or authorized successor. My father had signed it. His signature was at the bottom, clean and deliberate, nothing like the rushed page Jason had signed at Calloway's office 26 years later. Then I found the renewal clause. The lease auto-renewed every 5 years. It had renewed in 2003, 2008, 2013, 2018, and 2023. Every cycle, the payments had gone into escrow. Every cycle, nobody had come forward to collect. The fiber line had been running under that warehouse for 27 years. My father had known. He'd signed the paperwork, filed it properly, and then for reasons I will never fully understand, never called to collect a single dollar. Dad always said Jason had vision. I was starting to think he meant something different by that word. I called a property rights attorney the following morning. His name was Donovan Reed, and a colleague had referred him as someone who specialized in exactly this kind of situation. I sent him the 1998 filing, the county deed annotation, the tax notice, and Addendum B. Every document I had, every piece of leverage I'd quietly built over the past 2 weeks. He called me back the same afternoon. Michael, he said, the escrow account is still open. I've confirmed with Meridian Federal Holdings, they're the escrow administrator. Account status is listed as pending qualified claimant. He told me the claim process was straightforward. Certified copy of the death certificate, the probate order, Addendum B confirming subsurface rights transfer, and a formal collection petition filed with Meridian. He estimated 60 to 90 days to full release once the petition was accepted. Then he told me the balance. 11 annual cycles logged between 2013 and 2024. $191,000 per year, sitting untouched, plus accrued interest. Total held, $2,101,440. I wrote it down the same way I'd written the number on my notepad the week before. Slowly. Then I looked at it. There's one risk, Reed said. If the warehouse sells before you file and the new owner doesn't know to initiate a claim, Meridian could eventually treat it as abandoned or transfer standing to the successor parcel holder. You need to file before that closing happens. Crestline's offer was still on the table. Jason was still waiting on my answer. I had the death certificate. I had the probate order. I had Addendum B signed, notarized, binding. I had the 1998 filing, the county records, the federal contractor page, and Reed's written legal memo dated November 4th confirming everything. 7 documents. Every one of them filed, signed, or officially recorded before I ever touched them. I thought about calling Jason. I picked up my phone twice. The second time I got as far as opening his contact before I put it back down. If I called him now, he'd panic, involve his own attorney, start throwing objections at a title that was already mine. The closing was the right place for this. A table, a title officer, every document in order, no ambiguity, no back-channel negotiating, no version of events where the paperwork got buried again. He'd arranged the meeting. He'd be there. I filed the escrow collection petition with Reed on a Thursday. Then I built the folder. 7 tabs. Everything in order. Reed's memo arrived on November 4th, 8 days before the closing. I read it twice. Then I read the part I didn't want to read a third time. Failure to assert subsurface rights prior to closing creates a colorable argument for Crestline to claim successor rights to the easement. In the event of a completed sale without prior assertion, Meridian Federal Holdings would be obligated to recognize the new parcel holder as the qualified claimant. Recommend formal assertion at title review no later than the scheduled closing date. I put the memo down. If I sold without asserting, took the $480, signed the pages, let Crestline demolish the escrow claim, wouldn't disappear. It would transfer. They'd buy a warehouse for $480,000 and walk out with $2 million in subsurface rights. Their title examiner would find it the same way I did. Page 31, line item 7B. And they would file before the ink dried on our agreement. The other option was pulling out of the sale entirely. But Jason had brokered the introduction, told Crestline I was motivated. If I withdrew without explanation, he'd push back, ask questions, possibly challenge the estate transfer on a technicality to buy himself time. A contested title could stall for months. The escrow window wasn't indefinite. There was no version of doing nothing that worked. Reed had been clear. If I asserted the rights at the closing on record, in front of the title officer and Crestline's representative, there was no clean counter-argument available to anyone across that table. Addendum B was notarized. The 1,998 filing was recorded. The escrow account was confirmed. The documents said what they said. Stability, my father used to call it. The thing he meant when he said I was good at paperwork. What he was actually describing was this: knowing what you have, knowing what it's worth, and not moving until the moment is right. I had 8 days to decide who I was. The night before the closing, Jason called. He was cheerful, that particular kind of cheerful belonging to people who've already decided how a situation ends. Big day tomorrow. Lauren and I were thinking after the closing, we celebrate at Pelican Shore this weekend. Bring everyone out. He meant the sale. My sale. He was planning a party at his beach house to celebrate a transaction he'd arranged on my behalf, on a property he'd never once asked about. I'll see you there, I said. That was all. I set the phone down and looked at the folder. 7 tabs, labeled in my handwriting. Tab 1, probate order. Tab 2, 1,998 easement filing. Tab 3, county deed annotation. Tab 4, federal contractor page. Tab 5, Addendum B, page 4, Jason's signature at the bottom. Tab 6, escrow statements, balance $2,101,440. Tab 7, Reed's memo, November 4th. Everything filed, signed, or officially recorded before I ever touched it. My father had left me a warehouse nobody wanted. He'd also left me, folded into page 33 of a 44-page file, the most important note he ever wrote. I closed the folder. I was ready. Harborview title and escrow. Conference room B. 9 o'clock in the morning. The table was granite. Long enough to seat 8, though there were only 5 of us. Miss Sloan, the title officer, sat at the head with her folder open. Fletcher, Crestline's acquisition representative, sat to her left with a legal pad and a coffee he hadn't touched. Jason and Lauren sat across from me. Lauren had her phone face down on the table. Jason had his face up. There was a water pitcher in the center that nobody touched either. I had arrived at 8:50. Jason and Lauren had arrived at 9:02. He'd apologized to Sloan with the easy confidence of someone who'd never once suffered a consequence for being late. She'd smiled and said it was fine. It was. My folder was open in front of me. 7 tabs, each one labeled. Jason glanced at it when he sat down, the way you glance at something that doesn't quite fit the picture in your head, and then looked away. Jason ran the first 10 minutes. He introduced Fletcher to Sloan, explained the acquisition structure, mentioned twice that he'd been the one to bring the parties together. He used the word vision when describing what Crestline planned to do with the site. Lauren nodded at the right moments. I didn't speak. Sloan worked through the preliminary title report methodically. Page 1, Page 2, Standard encumbrances, tax status, ownership chain. Thorough and fast, the way people are when they've done something 10,000 times. Then she reached Page 3. She paused just briefly and made a small mark with her pen. There's a subsurface easement flag here, she said. Status listed as unverified for current cycle. I'll note it and we can address it in the addendum if I'd like to address it now, I said. The room shifted. Jason looked up from his phone for the first time since sitting down. I reached into the folder and placed tab 2 on the center of the table. The 1,998 easement filing, 26 pages, cover page face up. Parcel 0408882C, filed the 19th of August 1998. I slid it toward Sloan. This is the original federal infrastructure easement on the parcel, I said. Active and continuously renewed. Most recent renewal cycle, 2023. Sloan picked it up. She read the cover page, then turned to Page 2. Fletcher leaned forward without meaning to. I placed tab 3 next to it. The county deed annotation. Then tab 4, the federal contractor registry page, confirming the defense-adjacent fiber communications company as the active tenant on the easement corridor. Jason's expression had moved from slightly amused to something I didn't have a word for yet. Where did you get all this? He said. It was in the probate folder, I said. Page 31. I placed tab 6 on the table. The escrow statements. 11 annual entries, $191,000 each. Logged by Meridian Federal Holdings from 2013 through 2024. Account status. Pending qualified claimant. Sloan read the balance aloud without meaning to. $2,101,440. The room was quiet. Jason reached across the table and picked up the escrow statement. He read the number. Then he read it again. Lauren looked at him, not at the document, at him with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Something had shifted behind her eyes, and she was trying to keep it still. She didn't manage it. Jason set the statement down. Fletcher sat back in his chair slowly, the way a man does when the math he came in with stops working. I placed tab 5 in front of Sloan. Addendum B, 4 pages, notarized. I didn't say anything. I let her find Page 4 herself. She read it once, then again. Then she set it flat on the table next to the 1,998 filing and lined them up, parcel numbers matching, language confirming, signatures present and binding. This is the fixtures and structural rights confirmation signed by my brother during probate, I said. Page 4 includes the subsurface easement transfer clause. His signature is at the bottom. Jason's jaw tightened. I signed that for furniture. For the old equipment in the warehouse. The clause doesn't specify, I said. It covers all attachments. Your attorney can confirm. Fletcher cleared his throat. We can't proceed with demolition without federal clearance on the easement infrastructure. This changes the acquisition structure significantly. He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to Jason. Jason looked at Lauren. Lauren looked at the table. Nobody looked at me. Sloan set Addendum B beside the 1,998 filing and aligned them carefully the way a careful person does when they want the record to be clean. Parcel number matched. Signature was present. Everything corresponded. She nodded once. The subsurface rights are with the parcel, she said. As transferred. I didn't raise my voice once. I hadn't needed to. I'd placed 7 documents on a granite table in the correct order, and the documents had said everything that needed saying. Jason had signed the page. He just hadn't read it. The closing adjourned without a sale. Sloan noted the subsurface easement assertion in the official title record and closed her folder with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd seen complicated closings before. Fletcher shook my hand on the way out, not Jason's. He said Crestline would need to reassess entirely. Demolition wasn't viable without federal clearance. The $480,000 offer was withdrawn before we reached the parking lot. Jason paused at the door and looked back at me, not with anger, but with something quieter, like a man recalculating something he thought he'd already solved. Then he left. I stayed a few minutes after everyone was gone. The water pitcher was still full. I poured myself a glass. 3 weeks later, Reed filed the escrow collection petition with Meridian Federal Holdings. Confirmed receipt within 48 hours. Estimated disbursement, 60 days. $2,101,440. $101,440. Jason called on a Tuesday afternoon. He didn't apologize. I hadn't expected him to. I didn't know Dad had done all that, he said. I know, I said. A pause. Then, you were always careful with this stuff. 7 words. No mention of Nolan's Grill, no mention of the text at 9:41, no mention of the party at Pelican Shore he'd been planning with my money. Just that. I told him I appreciated the call. I meant it in the way you mean things that arrive too late to change anything but still manage to land. 6 months later, I listed the warehouse at $1.1 million, subsurface easement rights excluded from the sale and retained by me personally. It sold in 31 days. The annual lease from Meridian $191,000 deposits every year into an account I set up specifically for it. My father left me a warehouse nobody wanted. Jason got the beach house. The view, the dock, the thing you'd choose if you were choosing by sight. He got what he could see. I got what was underneath. My father called Jason the one with vision. I've thought about that word a lot. What he never said, and what I think he understood, is that there's another kind of seeing. The kind that reads page 31 when everyone else has signed and gone home. He left me a note on page 33. He knew I'd find it. He knew I was the one who'd read the attachments. If this story hit different, drop a comment below. And if you've ever been the one who actually read the paperwork, you already know how this feels.